Today, I wanted to talk about something that it meant a lot to me as a kid, even more so as an adult with some sort of perspective and retrospective, and that's the Game Boy Advance. Back in 2001, the Game Boy released on June 11th, 2001, here in America, and Pokemon Crystal released on July 29th of the same year. I had just gotten out of fourth grade, and we were moving. My stepfather found a new job. This was during the big Monster.com boom, if you can believe that. And he found a job that paid extremely well. It was 350 miles away from home, and crossing state lines in the process and everything. It was quite the event. But at that point, I had moved to like 3 different schools at the time, and it was just another Tuesday for us. We went from a town of about 30,000 people to a town of roughly 450 people. So there wasn't anything to do. We by some grace of God, got a BMX bike. So me and my brother would just cut up the streets, and we knew everything like the back of our hand. And it's funny that I remember my 5th grade class had 11 kids in it, and along with the school year, the season started changing. Once it got winter, we're like, oh, we can't ride our bikes. What are we going to do? We're just going to, we're going to go crazy. And that's when Christmas came. My parents bought me a clear Glacier Game Boy Advance that was comboed with Pokemon Crystal. And I loved Pokemon. When I would get home from my, kindergarten through 2nd grade, I would go to my grandma's and wait for my mom to get off work, and I would watch Pokemon literally from the time I got there to the time I left. It was my favorite thing. Like Pokemon, I had Pokemon cards, Pokemon cups, Pokemon, the Burger King things, the McDonald's stuff, anything. I lived and breathed it. But up until that point, I had never had a Pokemon game. And I, never had a handheld, never had a Game Boy or anything. The Game Boy Advance was my introduction to it all. But I still remember laying on this black futon bed that I swear to God would have been a war crime to put prisoners of war on, looking back. I remember laying on it on my stomach with my Game Boy with the very first not stolen AA batteries. And I grabbed Totodile, named him Mad Dog, and we just went on our way. We took on the world. And one of the things that I thought was crazy is that I didn't know any of those Pokemon. It kind of bewildered me because it's like, I eat, breathe, and shit Pokemon. I know the Pokerap from front to back, and I could probably do it backwards. And it just kind of blew my mind that I didn't know. And I think looking back, I remembered Tracy, and I remembered Chikorita, and it's like, I know there was something going on there, but I think that's when we moved. And it's like I had this entire new world to explore that was familiar in the sense that I knew Pokemon, but unfamiliar in the sense that I didn't know any of the Pokemon. And it was I just couldn't articulate my excitement at the time, so I did like what a lot of kids do. I jumped up and down and was giddy and just had a good goddamn time. And I'm sure that's one of the Christmases my parents looked at each other and like took smug drink a cup of coffee and like, yeah, we did a good job. And then they did. Thank you guys. Now, everything was good at home until one day I noticed my stepdad, he was larger than life. He couldn't, like, he was the man's man. Nothing ever got him down. He was always on top of everything. He might have been a little cocky and a bit of a bastard. But he was just, he was dad. And I mean, we always called him Greg. He never made us call him dad or anything like that. But I noticed Greg was, other than his bulletproof self one day, he was sick. He was laying on the couch and he looked pale and his sweat was cold. I remember handing him a washcloth and just feeling how clammy he felt. And his eyes were glazed over, and it's just like I could tell something was wrong even at a young age. I don't know if it was intuition, but it was so out of character for him that it's like, something's not right. I could feel it. I could feel the vibe in the air. And I remember him deciding to go to the doctor, and that was considering where we were, kind of desolated. He hated doctors. He would not go to them, but we ended up going. It was like 120 miles to the nearest like credible hospital, and he ended up having a low white count. He had within a couple weeks, I would say, he had gotten with an oncologist, and they told him that he had leukemia, and that was kind of a word that would stick around in our family for a while. And I remember on the trip to there and from there, from the very first initial hospital visit, is like I felt very, very anxious, and I had my Game Boy with me because that thing, I never left anywhere without it. But there was like part of me that was driven to play while we were like doing all these visits and everything. It's like I really found myself getting lost in something besides the situation that was currently at hand. And in a way, because like Pokemon it's a very rock paper scissors kind of game. Like if you have water, bring grass. If you have fire, bring water. This was the first time I'd seen a situation in my life where it wasn't just, have X bring A. It's just like, and seeing my stepdad as a father figure kind of be humbled in his manliness and everything. It just kind of, I don't know, it like I said, it made me want to find something to latch onto that wasn't reality. And I think that video games, and particularly the Game Boy at the time, because I didn't have my PlayStation 1, which I think we'd put up in storage. That I just needed something to hold on to, and Pokemon Crystal was there for me. He went into remission. This is kind of an excerpt, but he went into remission about 4 years after that, which, he's passed since. He's passed in around 2016. But let's get back to the video. So because he got sick, he decided that he wanted to move back from where we were back to where his family was, which was back that 350 miles ish. He had been fired from his company. They let him go due to his health declining, and he hadn't been there long, less than a year. And I knew he had filed for FMLA, but I didn't really understand everything at that point. And I knew they let him go, and he wanted to come back to be with his family. Because, at that point he was facing his own mortality, and he didn't understand the depth of it. So we got a U-Haul, and my mom had her S10 Blazer, and I remember coming back down the highway at night, and I was holding my Game Boy in my hands with the light of the U-Haul letting me play. And I very specifically remember that I had this Typhlosion that was, I don't know, probably level 60, and I was in the grass outside of, oh shit, it's the very first town. Jesus, I would stumble over this right now. It's right out between the Dark Cave and Violet City. That's what it is. I was between the Dark Cave and Violet City, and for whatever reason I was running through the grass there, and I heard a cry that I'd never heard before, and I was like, that's weird. And then I hit it with my level 60 Typhlosion and didn't die in one hit, and I was like, that's really weird. So I hit it again, went on with my day. And it turns out that I'm pretty sure I knocked out a Raikou at that point. Because I never saw it again in the rest of that playthrough. And so then we got moved in next to my stepdad actually moved in next to two of his brothers, which is just an odd coincidence. So I had continued 5th grade from there. I had done about 3/4 of my year up in where we'd lived at the first time, and then the last quarter I was doing when I moved in. And like I said, I've been to, now 4 different schools, and you go there, you make friends, you have a good time. But it was different at this place. There was this weird tension that, all of a sudden I was the new kid, and bullying started, and it was it was pretty awful for about 2 years. And once again, Pokemon Crystal. That was kind of my jam. I was able, like, no matter how bad my day was, I could come home and I could be the hero of my own story. And at some point, like I say, this was a couple years sort of thing, and we had moved to another place eventually, but it was still in the same school district. And I went with our new landlord to a flea market, and I found a copy of Pokemon Yellow and, Pokemon Blue, maybe, at a flea market. My grandmother had bought me Fire Red, which I also got at the same exact time. I bought a copy of The Confession by Usher because it was such a great song on the radio. Oh my god. Yeah, it was 6th grade. I remember that very specifically. And then at some point, by the miracle of God, my stepdad was like, "Hey, here's $100. Let's go get you something from Walmart." And I knew exactly what I wanted, and it was the Flame Red Game Boy Advance SP. And I was so ready to have a backlight. That was, not only did it have a backlight, but it also had rechargeable batteries. Looking at you, Xbox. And it was like the best thing that could ever have happened to me. It was, I would say, probably 2 years before the DS came out that I had it. Maybe a little less. But man, it was the most incredible. Like, I loved the Game Boy Advance, don't get me wrong. The Game Boy made me who I am. But the SP was like if I learned to drive in a Toyota Corolla, which was the Game Boy Advance, the SP was a fucking Ferrari, and I loved it. It was I used to pull my SP out just to show people. Be like, yeah, that's right, I got a Game Boy. Like, it was like the Razor phone before the Razor phone was a thing. And I was just so in love with it. And, so many hours spent on that thing. I quite literally well, no. So at the time, I had gotten Pokemon Emerald, and that's probably what I spent the most time of all my games on. I really loved Emerald. The Battle Tower kicked the shit out of me though, and I didn't know about competitive breeding or shinies, or I was very, very casual player back then. I didn't know much of anything. But going into 9th grade, I lost my copy of Emerald. I lost both my SP and my Advance somewhere, and that was pretty much it. That's kind of where Nintendo handheld died for me. And I remember going into 9th grade, moving to a new school, which kind of seems like a trend for me in grades. And my stepbrother was like, "Hey, do you want this? I don't want it anymore." And he handed me a PSP. And I have a great story about that. Maybe I can tell it to you one day. You guys have a good one. My name is Milo Wilo. The Y's are silent, but I'm not. Have a great day, guys.